In June, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said that Russia could destroy the undersea cables connecting Europe and the US to the internet in retaliation for the West's alleged involvement in blowing up the Nord Stream gas pipelines last year. There are almost 400 undersea cables laid out across the ocean floor, enabling the real-time global transmission of data and communication signals, and half could be designated critical, carrying 95% of internet traffic. Recently, Russian ghost ships, vessels that have turned off their automatic identification system, have been mapping critical infrastructure sites in the Baltic Sea. An attack could suspend access to phone calls and messages. Health and emergency services would lose contact with the public, making them unable to respond to calls. ATMs would be down. Workplaces and businesses that rely on the internet would also go down. E-commerce would take a hit too, exacerbating disruptions to supply chains and shortages of essential goods. Brick-and-mortar stores would be cut off from communication with suppliers, limiting access to essential supplies. Fixing the damaged cables would take some time, testing the social order of countries as public frustration mounted while essential services continued to be unmet. But it is not just vulnerability to attacks. Recent revelations confirm that the US government, aided by companies like AT&T, conducts surveillance on submarine cables, processing data at a facility called Pinecone in New Jersey. Similar covert buildings across the country serve as hubs for cable espionage, disguising themselves as regular structures to avoid attention in cities like New York and San Francisco. These undersea cables, carrying vast amounts of data, are monitored by government agencies, despite the seeming impossibility of such extensive surveillance. In 1858, a copper cable was laid under the Atlantic Ocean to connect Ireland and Canada. The first message sent through it took 18 hours to reach its destination, which was considered very fast at the time. Even though the cable broke just 3 weeks later, it was a big step forward for a world that wanted to be more connected. Undersea cables have revolutionized global connectivity, allowing us to access information from distant servers. There are approximately 1.5 kilometers of these cables capable of transmitting data at speeds of up to 250 terabytes per second. Data traffic through these cables doubles every 2 to 3 years. An entire industry is dedicated to installing, monitoring, and repairing these cables, which can be damaged by fishing boats, anchors, natural disasters, or even encounters with sharks. Deliberate cable cuts have occurred, including near an island close to China, raising suspicions of intentional interference, although China denies involvement. Sometimes it's clear who's behind cable cuts, like when the United States did it during the conflict with Saddam Hussein in the 1990s. But beyond just cutting cables, powerful nations can use these connections in more subtle ways to control information and communications. Access to submarine cables, a capability held by governments and militaries, enables a technique known as cable tapping. This involves carefully removing a cable's insulation, splicing in another cable, and duplicating the signal to intercept and listen to adversary communications. During World War I, the British Navy used this tactic on a German submarine cable in the Atlantic, decoding messages despite German efforts to use complex codes. World War II saw an expansion of cable tapping due to a more interconnected world, with the United States establishing an agency to monitor civilian telegrams and phone calls via postal and submarine cables. Mass surveillance was deemed necessary for national security during the global conflict. The agency was disbanded after the war, but laid the groundwork for mass surveillance practices. President Harry Truman established the National Security Agency, or NSA, to secretly gather and analyze communications within the United States, justifying these actions by national security concerns. During the Cold War, espionage became even more critical, and underwater cables were targeted. Through tapping into the Soviet cable, the Americans gained insights into the Soviets' apprehension about the nuclear arms race. However, as the new millennium dawned, the world entered the highly interconnected age of the internet. In response to the evolving threat landscape, new surveillance laws were enacted, such as the USA Patriot Act of 2001, allowing for monitoring of various communication methods used by terrorists, including email, the internet, and cell phones. In 2013, Edward Snowden, an NSA contractor, triggered one of the largest leaks in American history. The extent of the breach in American secrets is unprecedented in the nation's history. When we delved into these documents, we discovered a staggering revelation. It wasn't just a single cable in San Francisco being tapped. the NSA had its sights on every cable touching the United States, encompassing an enormous amount of global traffic, including emails, text messages, and phone calls. Their efforts were made possible through cooperation with various telecommunication and tech companies such as Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Paltalk, YouTube, Skype, AOL, and even Apple by 2012. Their overarching goal, according to the leaked documents, was to sniff it all, know it all, collect it all, process it all, exploit it all, partner it all. In other words, as another leaked slide phrased it, they aimed to master the internet. A spreadsheet among the leaked documents provides a list of the cables the NSA had access to. We have data for all these cables, which enables us to map them out, from the Southern Cross cable connecting California to Australia to the Apollo cable linking New York to France, and even the small cables connecting Puerto Rico to the British Virgin Islands. By 2009, the NSA had inserted probes into hundreds of submarine cables worldwide. Additionally, the British intelligence agency GCHQ was a significant partner, given their long history of expertise in cable tapping. There's an interesting legal loophole at play here. The U.S. law allows the NSA to track individuals outside the United States, but there are restrictions concerning tracking American citizens. To circumvent this, they collaborated with their British counterparts, the GCHQ. Over a couple of years in the early 2010s, the NSA secretly paid £100 million to access vast amounts of data, which they considered a goldmine for exploitation. This data included hundreds of thousands of names, locations, and 194 million messages collected per day. Unlike the NSA, the British could actively spy on American targets, but the core objective was to amass all this information. Now you might wonder, what can you do with 600 million phone events worth of data? It's far too much for any human to manage, and this is where it gets intriguing. The answer lies in a complex flowchart depicted in a slide, which may look mundane but provides insight into their data handling process. The NSA gathers all communication data from cables and phone companies and funnels it through a central processing facility called Pinecone. Presumably, this is where they process much of the data and seek patterns. The NSA's stated purpose is to identify suspected terrorists or individuals posing a threat to national security. To achieve this, they employ computers and algorithms to establish connections between suspected terrorists and their immediate network, including the people they contact and their locations. They assert that they only retain these records and discard everything else. While most cables used to pass through the United States, the leak prompted countries to seek alternative routes, bypassing the US. An example of this is a cable connecting Brazil to South Africa and then on to Asia. Over the past decade, the US has seen a decline in its centrality as the hub of cable connections. This vacuum has opened doors for another player, China. China is swiftly expanding its global cable network through state-owned companies like Huawei. This development adds another dimension to the growing Cold War-like tensions between global powers striving to lead the global system. It turns out that in 2023, controlling and spying on cables is a necessity for global leadership. The consequence of these dynamics is that the global cable map is undergoing a transformation. Previously, a single set of cables connected countries, but now we see duplicates. The Chinese and American lines are each establishing their own networks without connecting to each other. This situation symbolizes the mounting tensions between these two superpowers, heralding the bifurcated world we are entering. China is laying cables to remote islands, providing faster internet to their residents, even if it comes from China and may be tapped. In Africa, both the US and China are setting up competing cables, leaving the countries caught in the middle grappling with the implications of two aspiring hegemons vying for power, each pursuing information gathering in its unique manner. Nonetheless, it's deemed worthwhile because it translates into faster internet and connectivity with the world. Russia is also attempting to join this domain with its aptly named Polar Express cable. Although tapping into cables in the middle of the ocean to spy on your neighbors is somewhat outdated, there's some evidence that Russia might still be doing this. Their ship, the Yantar, a surface vessel widely considered a spy vessel, has been observed above known submarine cable locations near Ireland or Syria. Meanwhile, the private companies overseeing these cables are fortifying their defenses. They're taking additional precautions such as deploying submarine drones that continuously trace the ocean floor, ensuring cables remain undamaged and untampered. Nations are striving to establish separate systems both economically and militarily, along with internet infrastructure. These countries, particularly great powers, are building their own infrastructure to facilitate communication and information control as they are increasingly wary of the other half of the world handling their data. In the end, most of us simply desire fast internet access, the ability to connect with friends worldwide, and a sense of security.